Hello, everybody. Today it's Simon and
Simon.
surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
We are going to talk about the.
Oh.
Yeah, we should maybe
Hello,
mute
everybody.
the browser.
Today it's Simon and
Simon.
surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
We are going to talk about the. Yeah, we should maybe mute.
Does it work?
So now.
Okay, sorry about that.
Sorry,
Some technical
technical
difficulties. Okay, let's start all over again.
Yeah.
It's Simon and Simon here with HOFA, and today we are going to talk about the very basics of audio engineering. One of the very basics is to keep an eye on the signal flow and to mute what should not be heard.
To mute your browser.
So let's start with some of the basics, because in the audio world there are a few things that you should be aware of when recording audio, when working with MIDI, when setting up your DAW, whatever comes to mind from the analog to the digital world. So first of all, I would say when we talk here, it's audio events that's going on, because you can hear my voice when I talk to you, and I could use something like that, which is a microphone. And when the microphone is connected with our preamp, with our interface, with our device, whatsoever, a mixing desk or something that can work with audio, there will be a conversion. So we will have electricity going through the microphone, and at some point at the preamp stage, after the preamp stage, there will be a conversion. So our audio signal, our analog signal, will be converted and we'll have a digital signal. So for example, if we take something like that, which is an audio interface, something you might all be aware of, we have internal preamps, we have different inputs and outputs, and there will be a conversion, so our analog signal will be a digital signal. And finally, we can record it in our recording device, which might be DAW, Logic, Cubase, Pro Tools, FL Studio, whatsoever. It's really up to you. And yeah, and to listen to what was recorded, there should be a final conversion, maybe at the headphone stage, maybe at the speaker stage. But if you want to listen to the audio recorded, so the tape return, as we would say in the old school audio world, there has to be another conversion. So it's all about signal flow in the end. And that's something like a major task and a major topic for today. Okay, I would say before we go into deep, let's talk a little bit about connectors, cables, jacks, devices.
Yeah.
Let's start with something like that. So what do we have here? Maybe with the male end. Yeah. It's a male end. So what's that?
It's an XLR cable.
XLR cable with the 3 pins. So why is it 3 pins? Because we have
Ground, hot and cold.
Ground, hot and cold. That's absolutely true. It's a balanced cable.
Yeah.
With balanced connectors, with balanced jacks. So balanced means that even if there will be noise or things that might disturb the audio signal, it doesn't matter, because we have a balanced signal flow in the end. Okay, so this is basically used when you connect your interface with monitor speakers, for example, or if you are on stage and you have very, very long cable lengths. And because on stage, usually there is light, there is a lot of things going on, maybe video and whatsoever. So in the end, it's important to have a clean signal flow. And that's where XLR connections come into play. So compared to that, okay, here we are. The typical
quarter-inch jack.
Quarter-inch jack, exactly. So if you are a guitar player or maybe a keyboard player, or used to unbalanced connections.
You might know this.
You might notice this cable type is usually used for electric guitars or keyboards. You can also use it for a straight and direct connection to your audio interface.
Yeah.
That's for sure all possible, but we'd recommend if you have a lot of length because of distance, maybe on stage or in your studio or in your recording setups and surroundings, you might either use something like a DI unit, for example, to balance the signal, or at least at one point, a balanced connection. So that's an unbalanced connection, so we only have
one tip.
One tip, exactly, and ground or shield. So if there is noise and if there are any things that might disturb the audio signal and affect a clean signal flow, this might happen, especially when the cable length is far too long.
Yeah.
So if you're in your studio, for example, here in our surrounding, we have our mixing desk and so on, and we would connect maybe an electric guitar with
for example,
the interface, for example. That's not a problem. So a 2 meter cable like this one shouldn't be.
Problem.
It's usually not a problem, but yeah, just keep in mind that it's still an unbalanced connection.
Yeah.
Okay, according to that,
you might notice the difference. There are 2 tips, 2 rings. You can see it. That's better.
yeah, maybe I can bring it back.
Yeah.
So we have the direct comparison right here. So it's both 1/4-inch jacks, but we have only the tip on the left side and the tip ring on the other side. So tip ring sleeve TRS jack. So that's called the TRS jack. So we have hot, cold, and shield or ground, as you would say.
Yeah.
So again, similar to XLR, we talked about it before, but it's a jack connection. It's not an XLR connection, but the actual signal flow is almost the same because it's also balanced. So yeah, just be aware of these basics when you have to deal with audio to make it all happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about something special. Any idea what's that?
I think it's not an audio cable,
It's
right?
not an audio cable. That's absolutely true.
I think 5 pins.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's 5 pins. So we are now in the MIDI world. Yeah.
Digital world.
Yeah, in the digital MIDI world, so we have 5 pins, and yeah, if you would like to transmit MIDI signals, MIDI information, you can use these type of cables. But of course, that's something quite old-fashioned. So we're going back to the 80s, long before you were born, even before I was born. On a side note, but yeah, actually, if you have your USB audio interface or Thunderbolt or even Firewire, I think, but usually USB interfaces are also able to transmit MIDI signals. Yeah. So for example, if you have your MIDI keyboard, your master keyboard, your MIDI device, and you connect it with your computer and with your interface, there's a straight connection, and you can send MIDI signals, and that's all fine.
The
so
differences between audio and MIDI signal, we're going to tell you later more.
So you don't really need these 5-pins cables anymore, but you can use them, of course.
I think the standard now is USB.
Yeah, I would say so. It's much easier because USB can be so much. You can even transmit power.
Yeah.
Can
also,
be a bus power device.
Our little MIDI keyboard here is connected via
it's
USB.
It's connected via USB. That's true. And yeah, but if we go back to the interface, so maybe the back end, so maybe you can see it. We still have MIDI inputs, but also our USB, which covers actually all of it.
Also power, I think.
Yeah,
with this
true.
device.
It's a bus-powered interface, so you don't need an external power supply to make it work in the end. So yeah, time's changing. Yeah, in the early days, it's much more gear and much more cables and connectors, which isn't bad, of course, but
But you're
times changed.
more flexible with that.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
take your MIDI keyboard in the
True.
train on
Yeah.
the way to your holidays, wherever you go, and produce a track that's cool.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, before we show the microphone again, I would say let's talk a little bit about the connections on the interface.
Yeah.
Because as you can see here, we have a combination of an XLR and a usual jack input. So I can easily plug in my quarter-inch jack, but also my XLR cable. So I'm able to record maybe a guitar, but also a microphone. And that's something like a standard. Maybe if we go back 10 or more years, I think all usual consumer devices for your home recording setup are something like that.
It's also very flexible.
Yeah.
If you had, for example, just one quarter-inch jack and one XLR jack, you would be very limited. Here you can say, okay, I want to record 2 guitars or 2 microphones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time, actually,
same
because we
time,
have 2 inputs here. Yeah. The output section is a little bit more, I wouldn't say complicated, but you can go more into detail because we have digital and analog outputs. So there's a lot that you can do with that. We don't want to cover all of that because that would be maybe too much for a very basic workshop, but you can connect the outputs with your monitor speakers. You can also provide individual monitor tracks, monitor mixes, and you can use the digital I/Os sending digital audio to
wherever else.
Wherever you may roam. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about microphones. The fields of microphones is something like infinite. So we are only scratching the surface today, but we prepared 2 of them. We have a typical dynamic microphone, which is the Shure SM7B. You may know it from the TV, actually, I think,
TV,
from radio stations. Yeah, it's
also
something.
Michael Jackson sang through it.
Yeah,
few
James
songs.
Hetfield
Yeah.
used it on many records, and a lot of more artists, of course. And yeah, it's something like a standard, which is often used not only in the USA, but all around the world, I would say.
It's also good for home recording because it's very isolated from background noise, or it's not that much sensible like other microphones. Yeah.
Sure. And you can use it for so many purposes, but that's only one example. We don't want to say, get one of these and you will be fine, because there are different occasions and cases where you have to decide, okay, which microphone makes sense. So there is no real yes or no, you should only go with this one, or that's the best. It's one of the good ones, I would say, and you can use it for a variety of things, and that's all fine. But what we actually wanted to say, it's a good example for a dynamic microphone. And it's often used for vocals, but also guitars, maybe a little bit of drums, on the snare drum, on the hi-hat, for example. Yeah, so that's one example. And compared to that, the condenser world, so we have a condenser microphone, which works a little bit different because you need to feed it with 48 volts of phantom power, exactly, to make it work. So the conductors inside and the diaphragm will move, but that's something that has to do with electricity and signal flow. I don't want to go into deep, but yeah, that's a Sennheiser German brand MK4. Actually, not that expensive, but really good sounding.
Yeah, of course.
And you can use it for vocals, but maybe acoustic guitar,
also drum
stereo
overheads
recordings,
cool.
drum overheads. For example, if you would like to cover the sound of the whole drum set, it's always good to have some overhead microphones coming from above, and to have a real stereo image. Use 2 of them, so maybe a matched pair of these might do the trick very well. Absolutely. Okay. So that's it for now. We plan to record something later on,
Yes.
maybe using one of them. So we'll have a real audio track and the clip, and so we can say something about the actual recording. But now there is something that we should mention when we talk about all of that gear, and that's signal level. It's always good and important to know what kind of signal level do you need and what's your actual aim. So for example, if I want to record a vocal track using a microphone, we are in the microphone level world first. So if I set up the microphone and let's have a singer, he or she sings into the microphone, we need to use a preamp to finally have a proper audio level to work with, because microphone level is very, 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 very low.
I think 1 to 10 millivolts.
Yeah. I think
Something
that's
about
that's
condenser
that's a good
mics,
value.
it's a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The output is a little bit more, depending on the device, of course. Yeah. So if we compare this, a vocal recording, to, for example, a real keyboard, if you have a Korg Kronos, a Yamaha Montage, even an analog synth or a workstation or whatever, you usually have to deal with line level, because these keyboards have a lot more
output.
more output, and it's a different kind of level. So we are already almost or maybe more in the line level world, and there's a difference. So that's why most interfaces, even the cheaper ones, offer an option to change from instrument level, which might be vocals, which might be a microphone, to line level, which can be a keyboard, a synthesizer, something like that. So yeah, that's the two big things. There are some more levels that we could talk about, for example, when it comes to live sound engineering, working on stage, where you also have to deal with speaker level. But I think that's too much for today. But in the studio, in your home recording surrounding, in the very basics of audio engineering, it's instrument level, microphone level,
and line,
or line level. So that's the two big things. Yeah. Okay. And well, the actual adjustment of the levels works through preamps. You may have heard that before, and that's why each and every device that has to do with audio conversion in the interface world offers something like gain knobs. You can either do it on the device itself, or if you have a more advanced audio interface like RMEs or Apollo, even more, you can also sometimes do it in the software when you have a control panel, and you can adjust the gain in your digital control panel for the analog device. But usually you can do it by changing up the knob's position and bringing something like a microphone level to an actual level to work with, to a line level to go on. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So that's, some sort of the basics that you should be aware of when it comes to audio engineering. And I would say, shall we go on with configurations?
Yes,
like the DAW and the interface. So we talked about the gain, we talked about the different levels, and maybe we can talk a little bit about monitoring.
Yes.
So maybe a question for all of you. What's your experience with monitoring? How do you use the monitoring to hear what you actually want to record, or if you need to provide separate monitor mixes to a different person that's standing in a different room, a little bit more advanced, of course, but usually yeah, you
there are
have to deal with
several
that.
ways to do this.
There are several ways to do it, exactly. So feel free to write a little bit about that in our chat. And yeah, so I would say let's talk about our experience.
Yes.
Because in my opinion, there is no real right or wrong. So there's no set way that you have to go to make it work. You can always go your own way and also get to the aim and meet the target and so on. So the cool thing is that technology has that much improved and developed. So even the small devices, like once again, the little interface from Native Instruments, offers options of direct monitoring. So if you have to deal with signal flow in the analog and digital world, you can adjust the direct monitoring. And that's really cool because you don't need to wait for the conversion to hear the signal, because the signal from the analog world is already in this device. So yeah, there will be something like a cut to keep it from the DAW and to provide it in the analog world. So you can hear
out,
it straight.
I think, yeah.
Exactly. It's something like
that,
a direct out, exactly. Simon's right. Something like a direct out. So yeah, it just provides the signal that's already there before the conversion. So you can hear it without any latency, without any delay, because we have to deal with latency and with delay when we want to listen to the signal after the recording at the same time. So there would be a little bit of an offset. But yeah, sure, that's really cool if your device offers direct monitoring. And the good thing is, I think even the really cheap ones offer direct monitoring these days.
I think that's not that much expensive for this one.
Yeah, I think it's something like $150 or something like that. And there are much cheaper ones. Yeah. Maybe we can show our screen, because we prepared something for this workshop. So the actual audio that you hear, it's a Steinberg interface. It's actually a bigger one, I think, with 8 channels or something like, or 4 channels.
8 channels.
8 channels. And there's a control panel. Maybe you can bring it in and put it on the other screen so everyone is able to see it. So, okay, we don't want to go into detail that much, but as you can see, it's actually a mirrored view from what the interface offers, and we are able to create individual monitor mixes. So we are able to say and able to set what shall be heard if we would like to record during the recording and so on. So yeah, that's it actually depends on the brand, on the manufacturer, what they offer. But in this case, if you have a bigger interface with more inputs and outputs, usually there is a control panel that makes it much easier to control your signal flow. Yeah.
The big benefit of that is you also can use plugins in your channel strip while recording if you want to do this. This is special, but
that's special because there is a DSP. So there's a digital signal processor, and that's something that some interfaces offer, but some don't. So it really depends. But of course, you can set up your monitor mix without the DAW. So without the actual recording in your DAW, and you can still be in your control panel and, as you say, use the digital effects depending on the control panel and what it offers. So here's a note. A singer absolutely hates latency, even the smallest amount. So we use a microphone splitter. Okay, not ideal, but at least the singer's comfortable. Thanks a lot for the comment. That's actually a cool way
that's a good way
to get it done. So you have a real split, and there will be no latency because electricity and the flow of electricity.
It's analog. It stays analog.
It's analog, and it's the speed of light actually, and there simply is no latency to be heard with our sense of hearing. So that's a good way, and you can do it like that. Of course, it might be a little bit of a hustle, but yeah, you are absolutely independent from anything that happens in the software, and you can do it like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can even set up a little bit of a mixing desk, for example, with filters like EQs or a little bit of compression, and so the person, like the singer, is able to mix a little bit of the sound that he or she is gonna hearing. Yeah, cool. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing, if you are not able to work with direct monitoring, or if your workflow differs a little bit from all that has been said before, you can go with software monitoring. The problem is that latency comes into play. So depending on your workflow, you can use the recorded signal to send it back to the actual monitor mix that, for example, the singer is going to hear. So that would work as well, but the problem is that there will be a little bit of latency.
It's usually not that much.
It's not that much.
Depends on the buffer size.
It depends on the buffer size, exactly.
Also plugins with latency compensation.
Yeah.
But I think 5 milliseconds latency for a singer, you might not. It's very low latency, I think.
Yeah. Exactly.
5
the good thing is that the computers and the power that they offer, they are really good these days, and I think they're getting better and better. So even if there still is a little bit of a latency, you can be amongst under 5 milliseconds. Yeah. So yeah, it might work for some. Here with the example that Richard mentioned, I guess that the singer might still have a problem with that. So maybe it's cooler to split the signals or use direct monitoring.
That's the best way. Keep it analog. It's the best way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
before the
no
conversion.
Latency.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. So it really depends on your workflow. And yeah, dealing with latency or keeping it analog, as you say. Exactly. All right. I would say we'll start with the DAW.
Yeah.
And check a little bit of the settings and the setup. So for this workshop, we prepared 2 DAWs because there are a lot of them, and it's really up to you which one you would like to use. It has to do with getting used to the settings and the setup that you want to work with. Again, there's no real right or wrong. You have to find your own lane. And we prepared Steinberg's Cubase for today, but it's also a light version. It's not the full version because we are talking about the very basics again. So yeah, we try to deal with the light version, and I think your MacBook has Logic running.
Yeah.
So that's another cool DAW for any production purposes, because it's not only about recording audio through microphones or whatever, but you can also do some production like drum programming, working with synthesizers, maybe some orchestral stuff, and yeah. So okay, but I would say let's start with Cubase first.
Yeah.
And then we'll see
it's
how it goes.
It's your DAW, yeah?
Yeah, it's actually mine. So years back, I started with Pro Tools. I also tried a little bit of Studio One and a little bit of Reaper. And you can work with whatever you want.
Yeah.
It needs to make sense for your
workflow
way, and then you can go with it. Okay, so we have the DAW, we have the edit view, and there are a few things that you should do first prior to any recording, prior to any project, MIDI, audio, whatever. And that's the project settings. As simple as it sounds, it's much more important than you all might know. So, okay, let's take a look at the audio driver. maybe the most simple thing of it all. So we have a connection via USB between the audio interface and our MacBook that we're using today and our DAW, which is Cubase right at the moment. So if we go to Studio Setup, as the name already implies, there might be something that could have say something about the audio drivers. And yeah, here in the audio system, there you can choose from different ones. There you could also use the built-in audio if there is no connection to an interface, or some other ones. I think there are also drivers for streaming. Yeah. The good thing about Apple and Mac is that you don't usually need to set up the audio driver,
exactly.
because sometimes plug and play easily works. In the Windows world, it's a little bit different, because you really need the ACO driver to build up a connection. So it's always good to go with the driver. And yeah, that's what we already said. So the audio driver is really important. And we talked about latency. We already talked a little bit about the buffer size. So if you record something, for example, if you have a MIDI keyboard connected and you play something, then the latency plays a role in the end. So during the recording, we would recommend keeping the buffer size really low. So at low samples, for example, 128 or 64, so the latency won't be too high. Yeah, that's something that's cool when you have to deal with latency and when it plays a role. For example,
it's a good choice for recording.
For recording, exactly. When you have to deal with MIDI recordings, for example, because if the latency is too high and you hit a note on your keyboard, you will definitely feel the offset and a little bit of delay. So yeah, that's something to be aware of. And yeah, when it's only about mixing, so when the recording is done and you have to play back what you want to hear, you can set it up. So the usage of computer power won't be that high, but if you set the buffer size to a very low value, it's quite demanding on your computer. And yeah, but if you have a machine with a lot of power, you can
keep it low
and go with lower values. So yeah, that's something about latency, something about setting up. Okay, that's the audio driver.
Yeah,
that I would say maybe the first thing that comes to mind, setting up a connection between the audio device and your computer, your DAW.
Kind of the most important function,
I
tool.
think that's where it all begins. Yeah. It's all based on that. Okay, project setup. There are a few things that we should talk about, especially the sample rate and the bit depth. Can you tell us a little bit about these two parameters?
Yeah, the sample rate. I don't want to get too deep in that, but the sample rate are the points where your signal gets analyzed. I think you can say that. Yeah.
During the conversion.
During the conversion, for in the video or in live sound, it's 48 kilohertz. In the studio, you can use 44.1, also 48.
Or even higher.
Higher, 69, but I mixed a project with, I think, 90 tracks.
A lot of data in the end.
Yeah. And the computer was very loud.
It depends on your aim. So if you want to provide high definition audio and if you record it in 96 and want to keep that, it's all fine, but you also need the computer power in the end, as you said before. But yeah, there are some values that are standards right now, like in film, in movies, it's 48, also sometimes in live sound. And in the studio, for example, if we talk about CDs or also digital releases, standard digital releases like Spotify, usually 44.1 is a typical standard value that we
also,
can go with.
CDs for the most. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the sample rate. It has to do with the conversion, because when you come from the analog world and you need to convert the analog signal to record it in the digital one, there has to be a conversion. And yeah, that's done in samples. So samples is the smallest unit that you can ever have in the digital audio world. Yeah. There's a question. Hello, does it mean that in the analog time, 60s and 70s, okay, there was no latency at all? There's some truth in these words, because back then, engineers, bands, artists, they worked with tape machines. And tape machines is all analog. But for example, if we talk about MIDI, which, okay, is something from the 80s, but if you have different MIDI devices connected to each other, there is some kind of latency, because it's a little bit of digital. But in the 60s, 70s, usually it's the speed of light, because it's electricity.
At least
so
no latency
because of no conversion at all. Yeah, sure. We can say that. Yeah. Okay. The bit depth is the other important parameter that comes into mind and has to be set. It also has to do with your final aim. Where do you want to go? And the bit depth is something like the dynamic range. So from the lowest parts in sound to the highest parts. So it comes to actual volume.
Yeah.
So from silence to, let's say, a jet starting from the airport.
That's a good.
That's
good
the
way to say
dynamic
it.
range. Yeah, and you have 6-bit per 6 dB per bit, and nowadays the 24-bit format is something like a standard. Usually your DAW is able to work in 32 or even 64 bits. That being said, it's kind of easy for stuff like oversampling in your plugins, that you can work with 32-bit floating points. That there won't be any noticeable distortions. And but in the end, when it comes to breaking it down, the mix down, the render, you have to decide what's your actual aim. And we have the CD format. I think it's still relevant. So 44.1 and 16-bit is something in the CD world. When you try to deal with mastering, that's something you need to know. And for streaming releases, 24 is
24.
something like a standard. And when you set up your project, your template, your DAW, 24 is something that you can go with, and work on it and do your recordings and your projects and so on. Yeah. Okay, cool. So another point is the routing, the input routing and the output routing. So where does the audio come from and where does it go? In simple words. And for that, we can go to the audio connections. So that's also the bus setup. So we could easily add some buses. For example, our interface has something like 8 inputs. So we could set them up by adding different buses. In standard mode, there are already 2 inputs. It's the stereo in with the left and the right channel, but I could also say, okay, I'm adding a bus, but it should be mono because it's only one microphone. So you don't need to set up a stereo bus for a mono signal. That doesn't make that much sense. Yeah, sure. When you do so, you will also only hear the left channel because stereos are always consisting of the left and the right channel.
2 channels.
Yeah, so that's why I now set up a mono.
these settings look different in every DAW.
Yeah,
but it
really
works
depends.
really similar.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so maybe we'll need it for later on. So I would say I rename it. Let's say mic for later when we record something.
Yeah.
I think it's not that far away from now. Okay, that's the input routing and also the output routing. So setting up the devices that you want to feed for hearing what you recorded or what the project is all about. In this way, it's our mix 1 left and mix 1 right. Also in standard, a stereo bus, stereo output, but I can say, okay, there are a lot more. I think there are 4 options here, left, right. So something like 8 output possibilities that we can use and a lot of more, some more digital stuff, yeah. But that's just the standard and it really depends on your interface and what it offers. So the input routing and the output routing is really important to make it work.
Yeah.
Okay. Talking about audio all the time, would you be up to record something?
Sure, always.
Is that cool? Okay, let's do it. So I added a bus, a mono bus. Here it is. And named it mic. So let's see if it works for us. If I now, so I set up the project with the audio driver, with the sample rate, with the bit depth, and now I want to add a track. So you say it should work. We will see.
Yeah.
It's always a little bit of a challenge. Remember our introduction?
Yeah.
That worked really well. Okay, so yeah, how about MK4?
Yes.
So let's use the Sennheiser MK4. The configuration of the track that I'm now adding is mono. That's what I said. I'm setting up a microphone, only one microphone, so that's a mono signal. Yeah, easy.
Just one channel.
Yeah. One channel, yeah. But the audio outputs, so that what I would like to hear is stereo. Because, for example, if you have a playback, a pre-recorded session, and you just want to record vocals on top of it, the final result and the final mix should be in stereo. Yeah, it just makes sense. So the audio outputs and the final destination, if you will, should be in stereo. Okay, anyways, there we are. Okay.
We take an XLR cable.
There it is. Okay, so I would say we use the male end for the interface.
I take the male.
Yeah. That's
plug
really
it
cool.
in.
Okay, do it.
Turn the gain up, down.
And I take the female end to connect it with the actual microphone. See if it works. There should be something like a click.
Click.
Okay.
It worked.
Absolutely. So I think that's the side to speak in or to sing in. I'm not going to sing, don't worry. I'm just saying a few words. I don't know. That's really up to you, but thanks anyways. So, okay. There's something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
It's a condenser microphone. We need phantom power.
Yeah, it's powered through this XLR cable from the audio interface.
Absolutely.
Just turn it on. The red light is on.
The red light is on. That's really cool. Okay. And it's change up the editor's view. So I brought in the mixing view because we can now see that there is signal on the stereo in, but there's not anything on the mic. So maybe we should check the routing.
Yeah.
Because we now would record a stereo signal and only the left channel. Yeah. And that's something that always happens at first. So if you say so, it's input free, but you connect it with input one. So I would say, come on, let's do it. Input one, and we don't need both of them. Just use the mono input jack. And here we are, mono input bus. in this regard.
Now
Okay.
we can see signal.
And now
on
we can
the
see if I talk into the microphone that there is signal, that
but
there's signal
not
level.
that much.
Not that much. So how about a little bit of using the preamp knob?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Go
turn
for
it
it.
up.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to speak into the microphone, and here it is. All right. I think that's cool. And now,
And you're very close to that microphone. Oh, but,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
let's see. So maybe we can have a little bit of a comparison later on.
Yeah.
So anyways, okay, let's start the recording. Yeah, I think now it works. We don't need the click track. So here we are. Yeah, I think we can already see it. So if we zoom down, there is some live in this clip. Yeah, okay. Just for testing purposes, I think that's enough to have a check if it works. Okay. All right. Let's see how it goes and if we hear it. Hopefully we do. Don't need the click track. So here we are. Yeah, I think we can already see it. So if we zoom down, there is some live in this clip. And so on.
Perfect.
Just for testing purposes. It doesn't sound that bad, actually.
No.
I think my voice is
Yeah.
covered quite clear. And of course, I was really close to the microphone, but it works. And as you can see, it's all routed to the stereo track. And yeah, on both ends there is line level. So here on the right side we have the stereo out, which is the master bus, but also the MK4. And yeah, there's of course still level to be seen on the mic bus because it's still turned on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that works.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that we might talk about, but we can also throw it in at this point. If you have an audio track, you can have different clips. So if you will, an audio clip is something like an event, and you can definitely have multiple clips. So if I copy paste it, so just imagine that these are different takes of whatever audio you want. You still have only one track, but different
Four
clips. Exactly. So we have 4 audio clips, and yeah, you can edit them, you can move them, you can use the grid, and so on. Yeah. But that's actually the editing and finally the mixing stage after the recording. But yeah.
But that's basically it. Recording.
Exactly.
So simple is that.
Cool. So, how about a not so good example for clipping?
Yeah.
Shall we go over the top?
I think so.
Give it to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just turn the
All right.
input
All right.
more
Yes.
up.
Yes. Just give it going. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There is a red
The red
light.
light.
All right. Okay. Let's go for it. Check 1, 2. I'm pretty sure that this is not gonna sound any good at all. And as you can already see, when we compare the waveforms, so here we are in the good world with enough headroom and a very healthy signal. Then we have some distortion going on here. So let's see how it sounds. Check 1, 2. Oh yeah, I think that's already enough. Yeah. Maybe I bring it a little bit down because that's way too loud, but you will still hear. Yeah, even if I turn down the clip gain, you can still see it that there are cuts. It's no full waves because you can imagine a usual wave. It's all done in waves.
No information anymore.
No information, exactly. So there are real cuts. The signal is cutted, and therefore, it's real clipping.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound that good. Check 1, 2. I'm pretty sure that this is not gonna sound any good at all. Yeah, sure. So keep an eye on the signal level, on the gain.
And this is not analog distortion that we want. We have plugins, distortion plugins or saturation plugins. They are analog tape distortion. emulating analog tape distortion.
We go back in time.
Yeah.
So when you remember the 60s and 70s, for
I
example,
remember.
the Beatles. Yeah, but you know music
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the
of course.
time. So and when they used with analog tape and with analog mixing consoles, distortion wasn't a bad thing at all. Because, for example, if you play guitar and you have a tube amp, what does a tube amp do? It distorts.
Yeah.
There are harmonic distortions going on, and these distortions make it sound warmer to our ear. So
harmonic overtones.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of technical things, it's something bad, if you will, but when you listen to it, it isn't that bad because it sounds good to our ears. But digital clipping, when you go over the top, if all bits are served, then you will get a sound like this, and that's not that cool. So yeah, you need to have a difference here. But as you say, there are a lot of plugins.
Yeah.
And
we also have a plugin.
We also have a plugin, exactly, the saturator. The saturator adds some distortion.
Modes,
So the overtone structure and the harmonic structure gets affected. And that can be something cool if you are mixing a lot of things and you are working on the drum bus or the stereo bus and you want to add a little bit of analogy distortion, you can go with that. That's all fine. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I think that's it for now. Shall we, before we take a little break, 10 minutes left, that's all good. Shall we move over to Logic? Is it cool with you?
Yeah, of course.
To talk a little bit about MIDI?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's cool, okay.
Do you want to do it?
So we don't need to keep it. Okay, so it's all up to you. It's your DAW, but I would play some notes to record MIDI.
So now, this is the start window when you open Logic. Just create a new empty project. We create a MIDI track now because we want to record an synthesizer, MIDI, keyboard, whatever. Yeah. I think I load the Logic synthesizer here as an instrument, software instrument, and then the data from the MIDI keyboard feeds the synthesizer, and we will hear signal. The MIDI keyboard doesn't have any hearable signal.
Absolutely.
It just feeds the data, and we can make it. We can make sound with a synthesizer in Logic, for example.
So that's one of the big differences between audio and MIDI. Because audio information, as you may remember, the clips and the track, the distortion and the good signal, it's all real audio information that was recorded. But MIDI information, it's only controlling data. So the controlling data is there to control. And we need to feed something like a virtual instrument, for example. It can also be a hardware synthesizer. It doesn't matter because we can say, okay, our DAW can use the MIDI information and send it to an analog synth that is capable of receiving MIDI information. Yeah, that works in the end. We now do it in Logic. The Alchemy is something like a built-in synthesizer by Logic.
Very big synthesizer.
A really big one, okay. Let's go for it. So I'll do my very best. I think I have 25 keys or something like that. Let's see what
you can create with that.
What can I create with that? So just give me a sound, and then we'll have a check if it works.
Just play, and we can check if you're okay.
There's an arpeggiator going on as well.
Oh yeah. So now.
Maybe we can record
this.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Click R for recording, and now it works.
All right. Okay. Okay, can we take a look at the MIDI notes?
Of course.
That would be cool. So we heard a little bit of sound, and we can change the sound anytime during the recording or afterwards. That's something really cool when you are in the MIDI world, because it's only controlling data. That makes it a lot easier. If we record audio, it's not that easy to change it up. For example, the tunings, or if there is any noise or hissing going on and you have to do some editing, that takes time. But in the MIDI world, it's really easy to adjust anything that's going on.
You can change everything later on.
Absolutely.
Just want to say something about that red light here, down under. This means clipping, but it's not the synthesizer that clipped, it was the metronome. It's very loud, so we don't have to...
we don't need to be worried.
Thank you.
Okay.
So this is the...
That's the MIDI editor, the piano roll. Yeah, I think you've seen that before. Almost every DAW offers something like that. So we have the keys on the left side, and we have the notes shown in bars, in red bars in this time, and I think the color depends on the actual velocity, how hard I hit the actual note and key.
Here we can see you played very softly. And here more loud.
Absolutely.
You can hear it
and we can change it. So that's really cool. So I don't need to record and play it again. I can just mark this one note and bring it up or bring it down. That's really cool.
Let's take it down. Let's take a listen.
The sound changes as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And if we bring it up.
Yeah, do it. Oh yeah. So the velocity has also an effect on the actual sound and sound design, because this synthesizer and this sound depends on the signal that you receive and that you need to work with. Yeah, really cool. And as you can see, it's only controlling data, so we can do. Can you transpose it? Maybe bring it up to, let's say, a perfect fourth or whatever.
Can do it, of course.
Or so,
or octave.
An octave. Yeah, just do it. Yeah, that's cool.
So something like that.
Okay, once again. Yeah, sounds a bit different,
but not bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we also can change the sound. We can take a different synthesizer.
Yeah. There's the arpeggiator once again. Cool.
Exactly.
So, I think both Cubase and Logic, for our example today, they both offer MIDI tracks and instrument tracks. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference? When would you need when would you use an instrument track like we did here before, and a usual MIDI track? Any ideas?
I would create an instrument track if I know which sound I want to use. For example, a drummer.
So it's directly linked to the library, to the plugin, to the effect. Yeah. And the MIDI track, for example, if you would like to send the MIDI information somewhere. If you have external gear, for example, so you only need the MIDI track in your digital world, and you can then send the MIDI information to your external gear. So that would be cool. But even if we create a MIDI track and put the content of the instrument track on this MIDI track, it would be the same, because it's only controlling information, controlling data. Okay. So we're going to take a little break, 5 to 10 minutes before we are back again, and then we take a look at some projects, some audio, organizing your sessions, maybe doing a little bit of a mix. We'll see. I think that's cool.
I'm fine with that.
Stay tuned. See you soon. And here we are again, this time
welcome back.
With no audio. All right, that's it. Okay, welcome to the second part. At the first part, we talked about a lot of basics, of course. And the second part is a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
So we import
mixing.
different tracks. We do a little bit of mixing and organization of the actual project and the files and the tracks. So, okay, let's get started. I would like to start with a drum recording.
Yeah.
So we some years ago, we did some drum recordings at HOFA Studios. And these tracks are also part for our students to mix a couple of songs. And yeah, let's show an example. We go to the DAW, which is Cubase. Right now, I create an empty project. And as you may remember, it's really important to keep an eye on the project settings. And this time, we are not only talking about the sample rate and the actual audio driver, that's all fine with us, but the grid and the actual tracks themselves. So the grid is something that helps us, that we have different bars. For example, we can use seconds or bars. So when you have bars, we have 4 counts in a 4/4 surrounding. And if I say, okay, I would like to move the cursor within a bar, I can say my orientation is the beat. So that would be like that. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit, but this time I would like to have a full bar. So it always jumps from one bar to the second bar, to the third bar, to the fourth bar. And the drum files.
Situations would you like to use this, for example?
Right at the start, when I would like to set up my files, my tracks that I import, because usually my sessions, only speaking of myself, I don't start at 0 because I try to keep a little bit like an offset at the beginning, like 2 bars or 4 bars, because you never know what's happening. For example, if I produce and mix for a band and they give me a call, it's all cool, but we have a different intro section.
Yeah.
There shall be something like a riser on top of everything. And then I say, oh, cool. So I need to add silence and the riser track. And that's why I keep at least a few bars before the actual session starts.
Makes sense,
but to each his own. So it's definitely not a must. But important at this point is the actual tempo.
Of course.
And the bars themselves. Sure, we are in 4/4, but the tempo is 96. So I need to change that. And as you can see, okay, the grid changes too. Okay. So there's our finder, drums, and there we have some tracks. Let's bring them in. Okay. Insert objects on one track or insert each on different tracks. Of course, I need different tracks because I want to have the kick drum, the snare, the overheads on different tracks.
Layered.
Layered, yeah. Okay, so I can then decide, shall they be added to a special project folder? Shall there be any conversion? For example, if we have material recorded in 48 and I would like to mix it in 44, to whatever reason, there needs to be a conversion. But none of that really works for me now, so I just bring them in, and then I can also move it. So we have different tracks, and then I can easily move them. Okay, shall we take a listen if it all works?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah.
There it is.
Okay,
sounds
cool.
pretty good.
It sounds actually like a drum kit.
Yeah, like our drum kit.
Like our drum kit, okay. Yeah. Recorded at HOFA Studios. So we have different tracks, and that's all cool, but I think there's a little bit of a motley crew going on here, so I would like to add some control to it, because the look and the appearance doesn't really match my mixing approach. So let's do some kind of preparation. Usually you start with the kick drum.
Yeah, I
You
think
too?
so. Me too,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So the kick drum, then we have the snare top. There's another snare track, snare bottom. So we might then work with the toms, for example, the hi-hat, the ride cymbal, the overheads, and finally the room track. That's one option that you can do. It's really up to you. So now it's easier. And did we talk about mono stereo? I think
we
in
talked
the
about
first
that.
part to keep in mind when there is mono and when there's stereo and what's the difference. Same in the drumming world. And you can see it, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see it. There are a few stereo tracks. We have the overheads and the drum room. I can solo them. Okay, well, it's this key. No, come on. Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely hear that it's a stereo recording of the overheads, which makes more than sense. The drum room. All right.
Sounds also stereo.
Yeah.
Far away.
Far away. You can record mono ambient tracks, for example, by using a bidirectional microphone, but that might be a little bit too advanced at this stage. But usually room recordings are done in stereo. And
the close mics are...
Close mics, yeah. The close mics are mono. Mono mics. So for example, the kick drum or the snare. The hi-hat. Yeah, so it's sitting right in the middle. All right. Okay. Organizing these tracks is something that makes sense to actually be well aware of what's going on. And at this stage, I would like to talk about grouping. Yeah. So you can group tracks to make it easier. So for example, if we have 2 snare tracks and we can go for a mix of these tracks, let's say, okay, the kick level is quite cool, the snare level is quite cool, the snare bottom is maybe cool at this level, so far so good, but I would like to adjust the volume of both of these tracks. So grouping them is something that you can do. Okay, let's do it. I would like to add a group track, and you have the decision to do it in mono or in stereo. Would you do it in mono or in stereo?
It's a snare. Also possible stereo, but in this case I would say mono is
mono
enough.
group
is enough, for this case.
Because we have 2 mono tracks, snare top and snare bottom. You can see it in the waveform. It's 2 mono tracks. So a mono group in the end is totally sufficient here. Okay, let's do it. I can name it. How about adding a hashtag to be cool and then just call it snare. We name it snare. And there it is. Okay. There's an extra folder.
We can move
That's
it
cool.
up.
We can move it up, of course. And now, again, it comes to the routing. So you remember the routing, the start of the signal, and finally the destination of the signal. So I would like to route my both snare signals into the snare group. So you can see it on the left or also in the mixer's view. It's still routed to the stereo bus, but I would like to route it to the snare group. And the same with the snare bottom. So finally, when I solo the snare group, it's all
also
there.
solos the individual channels.
Exactly. So when I do something like that, it's all gone.
Perfect. That's what we want.
I don't know about that, but that's an option, of course. So here we are. Good. That's really cool. So I used a mono group to organize different tracks. Let's do the same thing for the toms. So the toms, maybe there is something like a tom fill, maybe around here. There's a little bit going on, but whatever. The toms are usually in stereo. Although it's close mics, we have different toms. Remember, it's only one snare, it's only one bass drum, and these two elements are sitting in the center of the mix. But the toms, the rack toms and the floor toms,
with distance.
they have distance. So when it comes to the overhead tracks, they try to build up the stereo image. And that's why we usually use some panning.
Yeah.
For example, the left tom is maybe around here, the right tom is maybe around here, and the floor tom is maybe something around here.
In this time, drummer's perspective.
This time, drummer's perspective, you can do it vice versa, which really depends on the actual angle and the view. If you look at the drummer being in the audience, it would be just the other way around.
Yeah. If the drummer is right-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
The floor tom is on the left side when you look on stage.
and in this time, we as an orientation, we have the drummer's view.
Yeah.
The drummer's view, exactly. So, but when I add a group for the toms, would you do it in mono or in stereo?
Stereo, of course.
Why?
Because we also have stereo on the individual channels when we route them to left or right.
Absolutely. That's what I did before.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we have the toms, then I can say, here they are, and the configuration is in stereo. So when working with groups, which is a really, really cool thing, you need to be aware if you need mono or stereo groups. In doubt, use stereo groups. Yeah, so you don't lose the panning that you set in the individual tracks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we take a listen to it? To the toms?
Yeah, we can do it.
Tom group.
I'm not sure
they are gated.
There is something like a rise. Yeah, I think there is maybe a little bit of tom action. Yeah.
So quite big stereo image, but for this example,
it's cool. Just an example. And when it comes to mixing, you would need to match it with the overhead tracks, because the overhead tracks, speaking of the drum set, are always the most important tracks. They give the guidance, so you need to listen to them, and then you can set up the panning for the individual tom tracks. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I would say that's it for drums. Just a little bit of an introduction here. I would like to go on with full production.
Yeah, that sounds great.
If that's cool with you. All right, so maybe we can have a new project. But first of all, I take a look at it's 140. So how about creating a new project? There it is. Yeah, we can use an empty one, 140, and then we import these tracks. Okay.
No, try it again.
Did it work?
I don't think so. Scroll.
I'm not sure if the project is active. Okay, once again. Now there it is. Okay.
Again, we want to create different tracks.
Yeah. Maybe that's too much for the computer. Come on, do it.
Did you close the project before?
No,
or is it
but that
still
doesn't
open?
actually matter because there's only one in the foreground.
Logic closed.
Ah, there it is, I think.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Maybe the menu was in the background
Yeah.
and didn't show up.
Masked
Whatever.
by the edit
Okay.
window.
So here it is. Yeah, exactly. But I'm actually not sure if that really works. Okay, whatsoever. I think it's cool to close it and start all over again.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't really work. So, okay. Can we... Yeah, where it is.
Just
there it
open
is.
it again.
Okay, here it comes. So in doubt, if there are any issues, sometimes restarting the whole thing might actually help. Okay, so let's go for it again. 140. It's always good to set the tempo and the project settings before you import anything. Let's see if it works this time. Oh yeah.
Very quick.
Wow, actually, I'm surprised. Just kidding. Okay, cool. So here we are again. Maybe shall we take a quick listen
Yeah,
to
of
what's
course.
actually going on
I think
before
the
we
levels
do
are
anything?
okay. Yeah.
We will see. I will show you the mixer. So please take a look at the stereo out, not only the individual tracks. So maybe there's something that we can see
Now
here.
you can see it.
Yeah.
Stereo
Okay.
out, right.
So we are here. So different tracks and the mixing view as well. Okay, and so on. I think it's a cool country pop song.
Yeah.
All right. We're happy and we're lucky because there was no clipping at all.
But
that's actually something that we should be aware of. So if we take the mixer's view, you can see that the levels are all set at 0. And these levels will add to each other, and finally the stereo out might go over the 0 dB, and there will be noticeable clipping, especially if you convert it down to maybe 16 or 24. It's not that bad in the 32 surroundings of your DAW, the internal processing, but when you could bring it down, when it comes to the final mix down, you might really have to face and to deal with all of that. Okay, so I would say that we bring the levels down before we start any mixing.
That's a good idea.
That's a cool idea. So, for example, I can use the queuing function, which is something in Cubase, marking all faders and then bringing them down for, let's say, maybe -7 or -10.
That's a good starting point.
That's a good starting point, exactly, to get the job finally done. So, yeah. Latency. Yeah, it's a lot more quiet, of course, but there is no real danger to having to deal with clipping. Okay. How about organizing the tracks? So I think there's one track, drums and bass.
Yeah, put it on first.
Maybe we use the blue color. And let's go on with the guitars. How about that? Guitars, electric guitar.
Orange.
Orange, okay, cool.
HOFA orange.
Okay, the other guitar. Just to mark it, it is a guitar, maybe orange as well. Okay, then we have the keys. Here we are, maybe green. The fiddles, I think that's something that has to do with a violin.
Yeah.
Maybe purple. Okay, cool. The tambourine, I think that's something that has to do with drums as well.
Yeah.
It's a percussive element, percussive instrument. And then we have the vocals, the hook. I don't actually know what the hook is. Let's see. Oh,
that's the backing track.
I think it's something like a backing track,
Yeah.
A stem. Okay, I would say that has to do with keys as well.
Yeah.
So bring it all in. Okay, is it the same color almost? Yeah, here we are. And choir and vocals. Maybe
Blue.
blue again? Does
Purple.
it work?
Don't know.
Yeah, maybe something like
Red.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there's a lot more, or it's a lot easier to see.
It's not a
the
must.
tracks.
But
It's not a must, but you can work with colors, especially if you have big projects with 40, 50, maybe 100 tracks. So you have different sections, and you can easily organize them. Yeah.
But you can also see the label. Is there the name of the track?
Sure.
However you want.
Do you remember grouping?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could do. We could work with groups, for example, for the guitars or keys and hook, that we have a group. But in this case, I want to add a folder. So let's say drums, and there it is. And the cool thing is that I can now bring them into the folder
drag and drop,
to to make the project not too much overflowing, because if you have many tracks and you already know, okay, I have drums, maybe 12 tracks, I can put them into a folder. Some DAWs offer this, and then I can close the folder and the session is not super big. So that's something that's really cool. A folder, you cannot use any effects on the folder
it's
track.
more like a VCA.
A visualizer, a visualizing helping tool, but I can mute and solo.
And it has a fader? Does it have a fader?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay. Just
you
a
cannot
group.
process any audio.
Just a folder.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. It's just for organization purposes. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we talked about the grouping. I could add groups before, maybe stereo ones, maybe mono ones. If we take a look at the signals, do we have some monos? Yeah, we do have. So for example, the acoustic guitar is in stereo, isn't it?
Yes.
I think so. I can see it in the waveform.
Sound stereo.
Yeah. So it's probably two recorded guitars.
Yeah. In this case, yes.
In the electric guitar,
sounds pretty mono.
It's mono. So if I say, okay, well, that's all fine, let's put the electric guitar maybe 50% to the left, to the right. It will sound like that.
Bring the volume
bring
up.
it up a little bit. Yeah. Just as an example. So when I add a group track, would you do it in mono or in stereo? What would you say?
For the guitars,
Yes.
both. Of course, stereo.
Why?
Because the acoustic guitar is stereo, and if we create a mono group, we don't have stereo
Absolutely.
signal anymore.
And I also panned the electric guitar to the right side. If I would add a mono group, it would be back in the center, and that's not what we want. Okay. So how about that? We have a group track here. We can use a color, of course. It's all in stereo. And then we can go with the routing to go all there.
Okay.
So, yeah, should work. Yeah. Okay, so what did we do? We imported the tracks. We set the tempo, project settings, it's all done. We imported the tracks. We did some organization. We brought down the levels, the volume faders. To avoid clipping, we worked with colors. We rearranged the track order. We used a folder. We used the group. We can go on. It's just a small project, but when you have 40 plus tracks, you will see that this is an option that really pays off in the end. Yeah, and that's really cool to make it all happen. Okay, cool. Shall we bring in an effect.
Yeah, that's
like
great.
A reverb.
Yeah.
How about a reverb? Maybe a basic one. So I think vocals are always a good example to do so.
Let's take a listen to them.
Okay.
Sometime and your mind eyes wide open and
It already has reverb.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's maybe not the best example. So for example, the tambourine.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no reverb. That's just a room.
Quite straight.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. I bring in the reverb and you tell me if it's cool or if there are any options that I might think about.
Let's do it.
To actually think it over if that's cool what I'm going to do. Maybe we can use a HOFA plugin for that.
Yes.
I think the algo verb is pretty cool.
Cool reverb.
So the classic plate. Yeah, maybe around 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I think the rest is cool. Okay.
Bring the mix down a little bit. Oh. Okay.
One by one. Okay. Now I'm interested how it sounds like. Wow.
Where is it?
Where is it?
It's far away.
Where is it? I think the tambourine has just turned into a gas tank. Okay. Shall I bring down the wet signal a little bit? So the dry, wet amount it's 100% wet. So that being said, the direct signal feeds the reverb 100%. There's no direct signal left. So in the end,
just a wet
it's
signal.
100% reverb. So that doesn't make too much sense. Okay. So maybe 20%?
Yeah.
Are you cool with that? Just for this example, maybe I can bring it up a little bit. So I do it with the clip gain.
That's clip gain, not the individual faders.
I can do it with the fader as well, but I can see in the clip that there's a lot of headroom and there won't be any clipping if I bring it up 10 dB or more.
Yeah.
So that's just fine to do so. Okay, let's take a listen.
Sounds roomy.
There it is. Without? Yeah. I think that works. Okay. That's an option to use the insert slot for this element. And I think it's cool, but you keep an eye on the dry wet amount if it works, that it works in the end. But I would like to add and use the same reverb on another track. The acoustic guitar needs some reverb as well. So I can use the insert of the acoustic guitar and then use the same reverb. That's an option. Does it make that much sense?
It's not the best option,
It's not the best option. Why?
Because your computer needs more CPU. It's better to keep one reverb and send the individual signals to this reverb and listen to the mixed reverb signal via a return channel or the FX channel.
Absolutely. You said something to send level to the reverb. Because when I use a reverb plugin in the insert of a track, it's all fine, but it just works for this individual track. And if I say, okay, let's have the same reverb for the acoustic guitar, for tambourine, for vocals, for keys, for whatsoever, it would be cool to have a signature reverb track to send some level from the individual tracks to this reverb track. And when we go back into classical audio engineering history, we would usually call this an auxiliary track, an aux track. Yeah. In Cubase, it's an FX track. So FX is the term for effects. So if I add another track, I can say add FX channel to know where it is. Yeah, here it is. Add effect track. Okay, let's do it. There it is. No effect. I think it was the algo verb.
Algo verb, right.
Yeah. with
gas
some
tank.
kind of setting. Configuration stereo. It's a stereo effect because imagine a room, a mono reverb. Sometimes it makes sense, but usually when we talk about reverb, it's in stereo because it's a real room with reflections on the left side, on the right side, up and down, and so on. So you have a real stereo surrounding. So it has to be stereo. Okay, so there it is. Reverb. Okay, I'll play it once again. So I think the 100% wet is cool this time. It's all
because
good
we
with
have the
me.
direct signal from the channel, right?
Yeah, so I think it was 2 seconds or something like that.
Something like that.
So maybe like this. But let's get rid of the reverb first that we have here. Okay. Yeah, go away. So I would like to use the tambourine track and the acoustic guitar track to send it to the reverb. And to do so, I can use send tracks, send levels. So for example, it's here in our destinations, and then we can use it here. Here is the reverb.
That's the name of the FX track.
That's the name of the FX track. And then I can say, okay, I would send a lot of level, but that doesn't make too much sense because it's only a slight addition to make it sound more roomy and adding some ambience. So maybe like -8 or something like that. And I can do the same for our acoustic guitar track. So here we are, the reverb, maybe a little bit more or less. It depends on the mix. And then I can say, okay, that's cool. Here's the reverb, the acoustic guitar, and you can see it's already linked because when I solo the reverb track, the tracks that feed the reverb track are
also
soloed.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's quite cool. Yeah. I think it wasn't the best decision to make the acoustic guitar sound that roomy, but it's just an example how it can work in the end. So what we actually want to say when using effect tracks, keep an eye on the routing as well. So when you use reverb and the reverb gets fed by different individual tracks, it's cool to have an auxiliary track, effects track, and then you can send level from each individual track and only have one instance of reverb, and this will also save the power usage of your computer.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Shall we move over to Logic a little bit? So
if you want,
it's not only Cubase only, so maybe you can show us a little bit in Logic. Maybe something that's similar. You can use the same project or
just open it.
Just do it.
So.
Yeah. So also in Logic, the project settings are important and the track tempo.
Should we take the synth files you rendered for?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's
you can
a good
do it.
example.
That's really cool.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Just create it. The tempo doesn't matter in this case.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Just
so we would like to show you a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe you can add some of these strings. Of these string files.
Yeah. Which one do you want to use?
Maybe the phase strings. Yeah. Yeah. Just use it. That's cool.
So.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just drag and drop it.
Yeah, you can do it.
Here also the same thing. Create new tracks because we want to layer them.
Yeah. They are from different songs, so they don't match. But there's something else that we would like to show here in this regard. But you can do it.
It says change the sample rate to 48 kilohertz.
Because Logic is running in 48 to whatever reason.
So
these tracks were recorded in 44.
44, yeah. But
and my Logic is running in 48.
48.
Okay, so if we don't do the conversion,
Yeah.
the signals will change.
Yeah.
The actual key will change and the speed will change. So we have to be really careful. So a conversion is needed.
Yeah.
If you want to keep the original idea.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So, what do we have here? Bright synths.
Yeah, maybe use the strings chorus, the fourth one.
Yes, for
And
sure.
then we have a longer part, maybe here.
This one? Or?
No, the blue one.
Here, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall we listen to
Yeah,
it?
sure. Okay, it's a stereo track.
Yeah.
Cool. Can we take a look at the analyzer, what's
Sure.
actually going
That
on?
was
So there's
my
a HOFA
idea.
tool that helps us detecting the frequencies and having a visual control. It's a HOFA plugin that you can use, and
Just bring it up a little bit.
all students get access to the HOFA plugins, which are part of the game.
Also the algo verb in the project
Yeah,
before.
absolutely. That's just a small example. And you don't need to use them, but you can use them. Analyzing tools are quite helpful, not only when it comes to the frequency response, but also the stereo image.
Yeah.
So I think this works.
This is a stereo correlator.
Okay, that's
no?
the stereo correlator. And just play back the audio, and then we take a look at the correlation.
Yes. Here, this one.
Here it is. Oh yeah.
It's very bright.
All right. It's quite wide. So the stereo image is really big, and there are some red bows showing up. That doesn't mean that the whole thing needs to be taken down, of course, but you may run into issues and problems when you listen to the song in mono.
You can do this just for an example.
Yeah, sure, do it.
So
Okay.
I take the analyzer poster plugin. So sounds very thin when we
Oh yeah. Of course, mono, everything sits in the center. But if you have a really wide sound with a big range, and it sounds awesome and amazing when you hear it through headphones, for example, usually it all falls down in mono. And that's why you need to be aware of that. So it could be helpful to reduce the stereo image in this regard. There's another tool by HOFA. There are many tools that you can use, but we also have some freeware plugins like the For You Meter Fader and MS Pen.
Yes.
And
up there. So here
the
it
second one,
Yes.
exactly. And this can help us reducing the stereo image. So did you get rid of the mono plugin?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
that's
off,
cool.
yeah.
So once again, for listening purposes, just play it back. Take a look at the analyzer. Yeah, it's quite wide.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Let's
bring it
make
bring it
it-
down. Exactly, maybe to let's say 66
So,
or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the same values.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So once again, just play back the audio. It doesn't sound that huge anymore, but you won't get that much issues when you listen to mono and when you do the final down mix. So always keep an eye on the stereo image. If you work with, let's say, Omnisphere and your stock plugins and all of these libraries, they are sounding great in stereo, but some of them are really, really wide, and you may need to put a hand on the stereo image to make it sound good in the end, in the final mix. And that's something that you need to be aware of. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
I would say one last thing for today is the final mix down and maybe the preparation for anything that's about to come after this section.
It's a good idea.
So how about setting the final range that will be rendered?
Yeah.
Can you do it in Logic, like the left and the right locator?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's a circle in this case. Yeah.
A circle, okay, cool.
Yeah. Let's
Bring
say
it in. Let's say, for example, this
part here.
part here.
Yeah.
I will want to have a render of this part.
Yeah.
And so we need to set the left and the right locator and the export range.
In Logic,
Okay.
it's easier than Cubase, I think, because we
Maybe?
just have to make the circle
okay.
here,
Yeah.
and they are the markers for
The markers, yeah.
for the render.
Okay.
It's also a loop,
Mm-hmm.
so let's make it so here. Okay, I think that's okay.
All right.
Something like that, yeah.
So only this range, only
Will be rendered.
this part will be rendered.
Exactly.
And okay, cool. And another important thing is the export settings,
Yes.
because
Shall
you really have to be aware, okay, what do I want to do? Is it just a mixing and there will be an external mastering? So it can make sense to use higher sample rates and higher bit rates.
Yes.
So the mastering engineer doesn't have to deal with, for example, only 16-bit only,
Yeah.
but you provide it in 24 and maybe not in 44.1, but in 96, for example. So it all depends on your aim when it comes to the mix down. Can we take a look at the export settings in
Sure.
Logic?
Just
So-
go on File,
Mhm.
Bounce, here,
Okay.
Project or Section. Yes.
And there will be another menu. Ah, yeah, okay. And there we have it. So, for example, the bit depth on the right side and
Yes.
the file format, of course.
Yes.
So, when you use MP3, you
For
need to be
example,
aware that this is a lossy file format. And
Compromised.
exactly,
compressed,
there will be a
compressed.
compression. It will be compressed in the end. And yeah, therefore, it's always good to know what's the aim,
Yeah.
what's the final goal, what do I want to do with it. Maybe an MP3 is cool, can be.
For an image when you want to send it to via WhatsApp or something like that to the
Yeah,
artist.
exactly.
Then
Absolutely.
MP3
That's
is
totally
okay.
sufficient.
Yeah.
But when you are working in professional surroundings,
Yeah.
even digital release, you don't need to upload MP3. By default, you can provide WAV or AIFF files. It's really up to you. Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. So what
Let's
do we have
select
here? PCM. I
PCM,
think that's
That's
classic
wave. Yes.
Absolutely. And then we have the bit depth.
Yeah.
And we have the sample rate. So the project is in 48.
48.
That doesn't mean that our final render has to be in 48, because you can say, I want to have it in 44.1. That's totally fine. And there will be a final conversion when you do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we export it in
Yeah,
40,
why? Why
Yeah.
not? That's cool.
48 or?
Let's do it for
44.1.
44.
Yeah.
And maybe 24 or 24
Yeah,
is
that's
cool.
okay.
Okay, the file type. What does the file type say? What is interleaved?
Actually, I don't know.
That's quite easy. Interleaved, it's just a stereo file.
Yeah.
Split would be something like multi-mono. Some of you that are familiar with Pro Tools, it's almost the same. So you have the left channel and the right channel separated from each other.
Okay.
Can make sense. For example, for those of you that are into live mixing and you have a digital mixing console, it's quite tricky to import stereo tracks. It's better to have a left channel and a right channel for the keyboard tracks or for the overheads. So this can make sense to re-import it into a live digital mixing console, just as an example. But usually we aim for a stereo render. So interleaved is all what it takes. Okay. I think differing has something to do with the mastering.
That's for the
nothing
mastering
for today.
engineer.
There is another workshop where we talk about mastering a little bit with our very own CD-Burn DDP master software, and differing is part of that as well. So if you're interested, feel free to join us. It's also here on YouTube. Yeah, sure. And yeah, finally, when we did the bounce, before sending it to someone, it's always good to check
it.
Because sometimes things happen and you think you did everything well, but the final render and the final mixdown is just containing silence.
Yeah.
Or maybe the intro section and the outro section, they are cut because there are parts missing because the export markers haven't been set correctly. So these are things that happen. If you may remember the start of the workshop, we actually tried to prepare it as good as we can. We had to do a couple of reboots regarding the computer system until everything worked whatsoever. But we forgot about muting
the browser.
the browser chat, and then we had doubled the audio. And that's things that happen. So we're all human beings, and just be sure to check your final mixdown, your final render before providing it and before sending it to someone else, just to be good and just to be cool. Okay.
Yeah. Mode, real-time or offline, means if you have any outboard equipment, like a compressor or whatever, you have to render it in real time because the compressor is not that fast like your plugins.
Yeah, absolutely. And the audio signal has to be converted to run through the external gear and come back and be converted again. So there has to be a real-time bounce in the end to make it all work.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
Shall we do it?
Absolutely.
Cool. I have not saved the project that is asking me now.
Yeah, okay. It's just a test for now. Okay, on the desktop.
Bounce.
I think that's cool. Okay, it's running pretty fast.
Cool.
We've set the left and the right locator.
Yes.
We've set the destination.
Yes.
Final file directory, parameters, everything that has to do with it. There are quite a few things that you have to keep in mind to make it work, but you're getting used to it the more you do it.
And here it is on the desktop because we took them as the render place. Here it is.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
The render markers are okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think so. We did the final check.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. Final checks are really important, especially when you work with a lot of plugins. Imagine the reverb tail. If you have reverb on the vocals or the drums or maybe more tracks, it takes some time until the reverb can't be heard anymore. So when you set the final locator to make your bounce and to render the whole thing, it's important that there's no cut. So wait for it, maybe a little bit longer until all reverbs are done, and then you can export it, and that's it. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's actually it for today. Thanks a lot for joining. There hasn't been that much questions, so we hope that you were able to follow and you enjoyed today's session. Thanks for joining in.
And see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.